Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I encourage you to hit that like button, to subscribe for more quality content, and to share with your friends. I also encourage you to check out my books on my author page. I'll put the link in the description, and to check out the playlist tab for more videos. Now today, I'm very excited because I'm going to talk about the IDW, which stands for the Intellectual Dark Web. And so without further ado, let's dive right in. I would like to also offer some supplementary material on this. So I put the link to an essay I wrote about the IDW on my blog, and I'll put the link to the blog and to that specific article in the description below. So be sure to check that out. In the meantime, let's dive right in. So you might be wondering what the Intellectual Dark Web is. If you hadn't heard of it, they are what could be described as an insurgency that popped up on YouTube a few years ago. And they consist of intellectuals of a variety of different fields, such as Jordan Peterson, who has an emphasis on Carl Jung and ancient, or I would describe writers like Dostoevsky and Nietzsche. You have Bret Weinstein, who is an evolutionary biologist. You have Eric Weinstein, who has studied economics as well as physics and math. You have other people as well who have facilitated conversations, such as Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, and Ben Shapiro. And there are a variety of other intellectuals that are a part of this movement. And it is very interesting and has been interesting to look at it and to follow it for the past few years. Now, one of the main claims about that you could say encompasses the philosophy, the overlying philosophy of and ethics of the IDW, the Intellectual Dark Web, is the notion of truth over politics. So Bret Weinstein and Jordan Peterson have had episodes where they have clashed against activists and protesters, and it seems that from the perspective of Bret and Jordan, they have been trying to just get at the truth. They believe a lot in free speech, and they believe that more important than the politics of a situation is the truth of the matter. And so that is what they have been focusing on. And so this is a very valuable idea in my estimation, to have truth over politics, because it implies that you believe that your personal social standing or status or your personal ideologies or beliefs are more important than truth. It is easy for people to think that, but really if you prize truth over any of those things, then you are definitely opening the way for discovery, for learning something new, for passing on very valuable knowledge and the like. So this is something that we have seen as a philosophy, as an intellectual movement kind of arise, where because you had experiences by people like Jordan Peterson and Bret Weinstein clashing with people who did not seem to care as much about truth, if at all, you definitely had this movement where you had people double down on this idea that truth is the most important element. And by following these intellectuals, which I have over the past few years, I've been able to see their arguments play out, such as on the Joe Rogan experience. Joe Rogan, who is also part of the IDW, and so we've been able to see this kind of movement take place and flourish. And so the reason why truth is such an interesting element is when considering the medium in which many of these intellectuals have used, and that is YouTube, none other than YouTube. And so YouTube is alternative media. I myself have found myself to be burned out from the mainstream media, and it seems that following the story of the IDW, I am not the only person who had felt that and has felt that. The problem with the mainstream media nowadays is they are very biased with their views. They only allow brief sound bites to be able to be part of the show. So basically everything is edited down, and you don't get to go into deep 2 or 3 hour conversations like you do on the Joe Rogan experience. And there are other issues as well, such as partisanship and these biases that a lot of news media seems to have, a lot of mainstream media. And so it seemed that, at least for the time being, seems that YouTube is an alternative media source. It's a place where independent creators can get on and can do a podcast or have people on the show and talk about a variety of different things and post lectures. They're able to do a variety of things. And as a side note, I would say that I myself, as someone who likes alternative media, as an alternative approach, as well as having my own perspective that is not always understood in the mainstream, it is nice to be able to take part of YouTube. Now, of course, there are problems with the platform, as we have seen, but at least for the time being, it has been as good as it could possibly be, short of maybe things being difficult in other ways, but I'm not going to get into that here just yet. So that was the benefit of the IDW rising from out of the ashes of the mainstream media, so to speak, of being able to rise from the ashes of the alternative media of YouTube. And this is why truth is such an important thing. It has been argued that YouTube will be monetized nonetheless, that there will still be the same issues of power, of searching for power and earning a lot of money. And so these things are definitely possible with the IDW or with YouTube, but as of now, that has not been the emphasis. And I think that is very important. And so I myself was not the only person who was, I would describe, worn out by mainstream media. And this is very important to keep in mind because other people wanted and were hungry for conversations as well. They wanted the chance to be able to hear things, to talk about important things in a different medium, and it seemed that the IDW has been able to approach this. Now, when I think of the IDW and some of the members, particularly the members that align with kind of my perspective on things in a lot of ways, I do really much value truth, for one thing, but one thing that people who criticize the IDW don't take into account is that these intellectuals in the IDW are definitely approaching knowledge from a variety of different places. So you have Jordan Peterson, who is influenced by writers and philosophers such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung and Freud, Sigmund Freud, as well as Dostoevsky and other writers. And it would seem that Jordan Peterson is a clinician who has been able to have a lot of work experience in psychology and with serving other people. So you have that. Then you have Brett Weinstein, who has talked a lot about science and biology and evolution in the context of politics and the social sphere. You have people like Sam Harris, who have been continuing the conversation of religion and politics and science and knowledge, as well as people like Eric Weinstein, who has been focusing on physics and math and the economy, or economics I would describe, for quite a while now. And you have Joe Rogan, who invites a variety of people onto his Joe Rogan Experience to be able to have a variety of different conversations. And so even though I would say yes, the IDW is limited, they do have biases, they're not perfect, it is nice that they focus on having different takes to knowledge, using personal experience and different fields and different disciplines and asking different questions to be able to come to a variety of conclusions. And I think that that is very important. I think that it brings up a lot of potential to be able to widen the scope of the conversation that we're not seeing in other sources, such as the mainstream media or academia or journalism and other places that we're not seeing it. So I think that that is very, very important to keep in mind. A lot of these conversations that I've seen, a lot of these intellectuals have had, is not very, I would describe, it's not mainstream, and they do go into a lot of depth with what they're describing. And they don't talk about a lot of easy topics. They definitely go really deep into things, and it can be sometimes even difficult to follow them, but it is a breath of fresh air. It is much needed that people are really willing to have these hard discussions, and they're willing to open up the public sphere to be able to incorporate more voices and more conversations. Now, there has been political opposition to the IDW. My hesitancy in mentioning the IDW is perhaps that, it's easy to get lumped into these categories that they've been described as, such as being described as being politically alt-right, which isn't true for the most part, if at all, because these thinkers and these intellectuals are very much in the tradition of classical liberalism, and so they are actually left-leaning, and at the very least, moderate. So they definitely have views that have been part of the mainstream at one point, but that have faded through time. And the reason why I mention this is because I will acknowledge they don't have everything right, but no philosopher that I've ever read, or no novelist that I've ever read, or poet has ever had it right 100%. And I think that that's very important to keep in mind, that we shouldn't dismiss knowledge or conversations or intellectuals just because we don't agree with them. And that is why I was willing to do this video on the IDW, because A, I want to acknowledge their influence on me throughout the past few years, but B, I also wanted to do a fair account of one of the most exciting intellectual movements that I've seen in my lifetime, honestly, and in the world. And so I'm very excited to be able to share some of these ideas. Now, of course, the IDW is not the only source of knowledge. Over at Rebel Wisdom, they described the IDW as not taking into account other perspectives, which I think is valid to a degree. You know, the idea that postmodernism, the good thing about postmodernism, the thing that a lot of these intellectuals have criticized a lot and criticized postmodernism, is because they feel as though it's limiting, as though it's doctrine, as though it's very corrupted. But I would say that one of the benefits that has come out of something like postmodernism is the preference for a variety of voices. And so this is a very interesting discussion to decide if truth is more important than a variety of perspectives. And I won't go down that rabbit hole today, but if there's anything I would say, it is that I do think while the IDW has been influential to me and has been important for thinking about a variety of things, I do think that it is very important that they have other perspectives and that we bring in a variety of different voices. I do think that that is really important, and some of the intellectuals have been seen as not, some of the intellectuals in this group have not been seen as doing that. And so I'm not sure if I fully agree, because I do think they try to extend the range of what they talk about, but it does seem as though they don't always bring in different perspectives, but I would imagine that that's a work in progress, and I would imagine the IDW continuing to expand throughout the years and continuing to share knowledge and continuing to ask questions and continuing to explore the world. And those are all things that I think are very valuable. And yeah, so I'm Phoenix, and I appreciate you watching this episode on my YouTube channel, this episode on the IDW, and I encourage you to check them out, check out their books, check out their YouTube channels and their podcasts. I encourage you to check it out. As a side note, Jordan Peterson has recently come back into the sphere of discussions, and I think that that's very important for people who were interested in what he had to say, and it's just good to know that he is at least recovering from the tragedy that had faced him, and he's been able to, at least for right now, have some more conversations about things that have been going on in the world. So yeah, I also encourage you to check out the essay. Again, the link is in the description. And yeah, I'm Phoenix, and thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. There is much more content to come, so keep a lookout. I'm Phoenix, and I'll see you next time.